audio. Don't forget the lens cap. How's my hair? So, the reason I set out to build this particular car, the 2002, I wanted to just build a fun little old BMW. I was originally going to put in a Honda S2000 motor, and then after talking to the guys up at the dealership, decided to keep it all BMW. So I said, you know what? I used to have an E39 M5, awesome cars, I love the power. So I said, why not slip off one of those engines in a little 2002 chassis? What makes it really step apart from any other 2002 would be the whole powertrain in the car. I went online, I searched, trying to find another 2002 with this motor combination. I've seen M60 swaps, big 6-cylinder swaps, S54, the M3 6-cylinder ones done. I found one that someone tried to do the S62 swap in. They weren't, I don't think they ever finished because I could never find any other photos of it. And it's kind of a one-off car. I think it's the one and only one out there. It's a motorsport motor. It's got great power, great torque, 7,000 RPM redline. I was on Craigslist one day and I stumbled across a 2002 that was local. It was in Waterford. I figured, hey, 10 minutes away. Wouldn't hurt to go check it out. It looked pretty solid. So I drove to Waterford, offered the guy a couple grand for the car, and there we go. Inca orange, it was the original color. Someone resprayed the car Phoenix yellow when I bought it. It's not my favorite color, so I went back to the original color. I needed something to hold the extra weight of the V8. I wanted something that's more tunable. I didn't like how heavy the 2002 suspension was. They felt like boat anchors, so I wanted to get the unsprung weight as light as I could. The suspension is actually kind of unique. It's full coil over front and rear. The front suspension is actually off a Nissan 240SX. The rear suspension coilovers are from the same car, Nissan 240SX, but the rear trailing arms are off a E30. Bodywork on the whole car, see, brand new fenders, brand new doors, quarter panel, rear tail section, rockers. The car inside the rockers have been reinforced. Underneath the car, there's a whole, almost like an EXO roll cage underneath the car to keep the chassis together and stiffen it all up. Front rear subframes are custom, and everything's tied together, front subframe all the way back to the rear subframe. It's a pretty solid car. So a couple cool things about the car, all the trim, minus the rain guard, the mirrors, and the bottom rocker trim. Everything else is original on the car. It's just been taken off, cleaned up, and polished. I sent the dashboard out to get wrapped and stitched. I did the French stitching on the dash. I did all the gauges with Speed Hut. I was able to choose my own font and text inside the gauges. I also got a Momo steering wheel with the white stitching to match the dashboard. And then I did a pedal pod, or a pedal box with tilt-in pedals. And on the car, for the front brakes, we did our own custom big brake setup. They're Willwood calipers with 11 and a quarter inch rotor. So I was trying to find the biggest rotor I could put in a 15-inch wheel along with caliper. It ended up being a little too big for a 15-inch, so I had to run a 16-inch wheel. But that's okay because I made these Toyo Proxy R888Rs, and believe it or not, it's only a 205 tire, and it hooks up. It does not break loose. These tires are awesome. The seats in the car are Recaros. I try to find some vintage Recaros. What year they are, I'm unsure, but they are recovered Recaros, but they are true Recaro seats. The seat bracing underneath the seats actually tied to the trans tunnel, and it goes from your rocker panels to the trans tunnel, and then the trans tunnel actually ties down to the subframe below because there's bracing underneath the car. So the whole powertrain on the car, again, it's a S62 V8. It's out of a 2001 BMW M5. What I ended up doing was getting the engine mocked up in the car. I cut the whole firewall out of the car. I laid out the motor where I thought would be as far back in the chassis as I could to get the weight further back in the body. I wanted to try keeping the weight distribution close to 50-50. Right now I'm unsure what it is because I haven't got it cornered weight. And I took the factory wiring harness, I stripped it down to nothing, I laid it out in the car, and I incorporated the factory S62 M5 motor wiring harness into the 2002 harness, and then rewrapped the whole harness with cloth tape so it had the factory look to it. I got remote master cylinders for the pedal box. I got a Griffin 4-core radiator, and then also a nice little thing that I thought was kind of cool with the hose clamps. I actually went with these Gates Power Grip hose clamps because they're like shrink tubing, like heat shrink. So it just has a cleaner look to everything. Everything on the car was made by me. It was my first real car build ever. So I learned a lot on the way. You learn a lot about metal fab and everything. This is just like a strut brace. These just tie into the firewall, which actually has like a roll bar tubing from pillar to pillar behind here.
Are those
these
original?
tie into? No, not original. I don't think the original car had a strut brace. Oh, to get the motor to fit in the alternator, I actually have to use a geoprism alternator to fit in this the configuration of the chassis, because the factory V8 alternator, the BMW one, was way too big. So I had to make my own little pulley set up on the front of the motor. This whole motor is all fed by a 11-gallon fuel cell in the back. So I got a 11-gallon fuel cell in the rear. It goes underneath the car. It feeds to a high volume, low pressure pump, goes through a filter, then into a surge tank. The surge tank has a high pressure, low volume fuel pump for the motor, which is always going to be in fuel because that's the whole purpose of the surge tank. Whatever's bypassed or left over in the tank gets pushed back into the main cell. Relocated the battery to the trunk just for weight distribution. The flares, these are turbo flares. Obviously they're not original, they're remakes of the turbo flares of the original ones. And the front bumper as well is not original turbo front bumper, but the lower lip spoiler is just a fiberglass remake of one. And then with the front bumper, the lower air dam in the middle, I actually fabbed up a little ramp to ram air up into the radiator to help cooling on the highway. And surprisingly, the little radiator actually cools the motor no problem on a 100-degree day here in Michigan in stop and go traffic. I think that's it. I think that's the car. All the glass is original OEM glass. My favorite thing about the car is it looks almost like a factory stock 2002 in a way, minus the turbo flares and the turbo bumper. The interior looks like a factory 2002, the exterior 2002, no roll cage, nothing crazy, factory, little exhaust pipe on the passenger side.
Big pond, the fish are the only difference. City out of harmony, lingering on the dissonance. Fishermen wrapping up citizens with their fishing nets. Sometimes chemicals, some played old imprisonment. Dissidents laughing at themselves as if they had a voice, acting like technology really gives them a better choice. Protect the borders as we stack up our elitism. Defeatism is what we pretend that we keep believing in. I'm straddling both lines, the quietest revolt. Politicians fake like they caring that we vote.